And next to that is the Municipal World Building. Scott McKay's law office is in there, the larger building. And the smaller building, the house on the right, is on the site of where the Grand Central was built.
Yeah.
And that house was built in 1874.
Yeah, by Colonel Green's father.
John M. Green.
Yeah, John M. Green built it. And then when they decided to build the Grand Central in 1881, they took that house on the right of the picture. I still don't know how they did it, and they put it on rollers, and they moved it down to Metcalf Street, where it still stands, what, 74 Metcalf?
Just the second house south of Gladstone Ave on the east side of Metcalf Street.
Yeah. You know, we'd have a hard
Hugh
time
Price Jones.
moving a brick house like that today.
Well, I think they took the brick all off the house.
No, well, Fred Green says, who's the grandson of the man who built it, he said no, they rolled it down the street. They put a foundation around it to stop the bricks from falling off, through gravity. And then they put it on big rollers and rolled it down, I suppose, Metcalf Street, and then then put a foundation under it on Metcalf Street.
Well, I don't know.
You'd think somebody might have made a sketch of that. Don, the building in the foreground on the left was the post office that was built by Frank Ermatinger.
Well, he was the postmaster. I don't know whether he built it.
Yes, he did. Well, you know, I mean, he made the arrangements and the contract for it to be built, and he moved the post office into there. And I'm sorry, I forgot what date that was. But
well,
that
it
was
would be in the 70s.
Yeah.
Because his father died in 1870. In the 70s, and he was postmaster at the time he died.
Well, I think that, you see, it was built before the Grand Central. The Grand Central was 1881, which is next to that, and I think that was maybe about 1877 or 76 that was built.
Yeah.
Now, of course, if you take a look at it from the west side, you can see the outline of the old building as it originally was, where the doorway was and the four windows have all been blocked in, and as you say, the front has all been changed.
Yes. Yeah, that building, the house on the right, it looks in better shape today than it did in this picture, which was over 100 years ago.
Yes.
It's in beautiful condition. Hugh Price Jones lives there.
Does he?
And it's a beautiful home.
Yeah, it is a nice house, yeah.
Yeah. He has the date of the...
Oh, that's something I meant to tell you. Mr. Green, who built that house, also built the house for Guston. That's just about at the corner of Pearl Street.
Oh, did he?
Yes, he did. And he built 3 or 4 really beautiful houses.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, tell us about that, Don.
We're up to the top of Elgin Street, looking east along Talbot, and this particular day was March the 1st, 1880, just 100 years ago, a couple of weeks ago.
Wait a minute, 1880?
In 1880.
That's when this picture was taken?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
80 years ago, in
Yeah,
1900. 1st of March, 1900. It was the day that they received the news in St. Thomas of the relief of Ladysmith in the South African War. And it also happened to be the day that snow fell from 24 to 30 inches on the level in St. Thomas. And when the people got out to celebrate that day, they tramped the snow down into the railway tracks, and the street railway didn't run for over a week.
Tell me, you know, it's hard to imagine how excited people were. That was the big news story of 1900, was Ladysmith was besieged by the Boers, and St. Thomas had about 12 or 14 St. Thomas boys who were with the Canadian forces there. And then when the news came through in the telegraph that Ladysmith had been relieved, the town sort of went wild.
Oh, it was a big thing. Like VE Day in our time.
Yes, yeah. Well, was that when somebody went up in the city hall and cracked the bell? You know, they wanted to sound the bell, and they hit the edge of it with a hammer and knocked a big chunk out of the bell?
Pat Meehan was the mayor at the time, and he sent Lou Dake, who was an alderman, Lou Dake up into the tower, and he did hit it with a hammer. And I've been up there and seen that.
Yeah, but just there's a chunk out?
Yeah, there's a little chunk out. That's where Lou Dake hit it with a hammer. I think he was up there a couple of hours hitting it.
Well, that's 1900 in St. Thomas, a bad snowstorm.
Great day. This picture, I know who took this picture, too. It was Henry Rowe.
Did he take it?
Yeah, Henry Rowe took this picture. I forget how I know that, but I know he did take it.
Well, I've had a couple pictures that Henry Rowe took. He was an amateur photographer.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was in insurance, real estate.
Yes.
This is at the same location at the top of Elgin Street, the Hopkins Block. Jim Hopkins, the photographer, built this, I think in about 1898. It shows up in the previous picture. I guess the date's on.
Well, Don, could you just tell people exactly where that is and what they can see of it today?
Well, it's on the north side of Talbot Street. The building is there, but it's not quite the same as that. It's where Jack Waite's Appliances is, and there was a fire there. I think it was when G.O. House was in there.
Well, Don, is that center window still there? On the second floor?
No, I kind of think they took the top story off.
That's right, and just the one story.
Just the one story, and they rebuilt the top. I certainly know those two little pillars are gone, and the date and the name. It's not too long ago. It was there 20 years ago.
And that's the Hopkins Block.
Hopkins.
Hopkins.
Hopkins. J.H. Hopkins.
The photographer.
Yes.
Was that where he started his office in there? Or did he just build the block?
I doubt very much if he started in there. I think he built that block, but he had been going for years before that.
No, I know.
Now, we're off Talbot Street now. This is down Elgin Street, on the west side of Elgin Street, across from where the liquor store is today. There's an automotive supply in there. Now, I thought that part of this building still stood in behind that automotive supply, but I guess it doesn't.
Well, didn't Carroll and Curtis, this was a marvelous old pine building, and after the monument works, well, I guess they stayed there, but it had those 12-pane windows, and then it was, didn't Carroll and Curtis make a sketch of that?
Yes, she did. Yes, she did.
And we're very lucky to have a talented person like Carroll and Curtis who's made drawings of so many of the buildings that have disappeared, and that one's disappeared. That was Doggett, who was a member of the school board. He was on the council, and quite a prominent family in St. Thomas, and he ran that monument works for a long time, didn't he?
Yeah, I believe at the end it was Doan that ran it. Panther and Doan ran it for a while.
What date is that picture, do you know?
I really don't have any idea. Possibly the turn of the century.
Yeah, 1900, 1900.
But I really don't have any idea about that. It's not a very good picture.
No, I was telling you, I have a much better picture of that a descendant of the Doggetts gave me.
Yeah. Back up to Talbot Street now, the north side opposite Hink Street. It's the site of the present federal building there, our post office. But in 1881, this building was built, the Times building.
And this was built by Jonathan Wilkinson.
Yes.
And it's a funny thing, you looked up the deed for that someday and for me, and it really was a very narrow frontage. I suppose that was the only part that was available. Like the old post office, or somebody must have controlled the ground to the east of that.
Do you remember how wide it was? 18 feet?
Something like that, a terribly narrow building.
It could be 18 feet.
Yeah. And the Times, St. Thomas Times was produced there until, until they amalgamated with the Journal and until they built the new building on Hink Street.
This was later the Times Journal building after 1918.
That was a real rabbit warren in there. To think of putting a daily paper out every day in that building.
Oh, yeah. And that was the year they started the daily paper in 1881, when they built that. Wasn't Neil Darrow the architect of this building?
Yes, Neil Darrow was the architect of that building, and it's on a close-up of a picture. It's a very nice front to it.
Yeah, it's an elegant building, just a small, plain building, but the front of it is quite elegant. Yeah. I suppose many people will remember the two center parts on the ground floor where the bulletin boards were.
That's right.
And particularly on Sundays. You would always go up there Sunday afternoon, stop, get out of the car, if you were lucky, get right in front, and read the bulletin board. It was a Sunday ritual to go up because you didn't get the paper and you didn't want to miss out. You didn't have radio, local radio stations, and it was particularly if you had heard something had happened.
Oh, yes.
And it was obituaries were always on the bulletin board. And on Sundays you would go. I remember in 1945 that Mitch Hepburn and Tommy Thomas, after the election, and it was customary after every election to have the winner and the loser go up to the Times Journal. And the two men went up there, one at one window and one at the other window, and spoke to the people through that window.
That was the election when Thomas defeated Hepburn?
When Thomas defeated Mitch in 1945.
They'd been such good friends, and that election sort of destroyed the friendship, didn't it?
Yeah, it was the end of the Hepburn era.
Yes, yes.
Right there. They say Mitch had a tear in his eye, and I'm sure he did. But,
now, I can tell you about that one, Don. That's the Bank of Montreal building on the south side of Talbot Street, and what's the street there?
Hinks.
Hinks Street. And that was built in 1884, and it was the home of Goodwin Furniture.
Mm-hmm.
And
did Goodwin build that?
yes, well, Sanders built it, and Sanders built it and promised to rent it to Goodwin. And what's happened to it over the years is the top story was taken off. At one time, there was a big sign on the top of that, Goodwin Furniture. The Goodwin Furniture sold furniture all over Ontario.
Okay,
somebody should do some research on how big an outfit he was. And
well, you've done a bit of research on it.
yeah, I have, and but a lot more needs to be done. And then the other stories were taken down, and now it's the Bank of Montreal building. All looks very modern, except you can still see that little entranceway to the back, can't you?
Oh yes, you can.
In the
That's
present
still,
Bank of
right.
Montreal.
That's right.
And it was quite a nice building with that mansard roof.
Mm-hmm.
Don, I'm going to ask you a question. Who does the suitcase belong to in the front of the picture, and where's the man going?
He must have just stopped for a minute to get his picture taken.
I don't know. That, again, is the same building, the Bank of Montreal building, but I think at that time it was still the Goodwin Furniture.
Oh, yes, it was. Yeah.
And Mr. Humans was the undertaker.
I think that's Frank Goodwin at the right-hand side there.
On the right-hand side.
I think so, yeah.
And that's the son of Samuel Goodwin, who started the business.
Yeah, that's a good little picture.
Pardon?
That's a good little
Yes,
picture.
yes, it is.
Nice picture of the street light.
Yes. Now, that street light, what date is that, then? Is that around 1900?
Maybe a little earlier. Could be a little earlier than that. It's a gas light.
That's right, it's a gas light.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a nice, good
Well,
clear.
we don't want anybody phoning us up and saying that's their suitcase.